Hey, we want to welcome you out to another presentation for our consultant leader training. Today we're going to talk about something that's kind of mundane, but I hope that we can kind of show you that there's a lot of features and things maybe that you might not be aware of that have been added to FamilySearch to make it easier for us to clean up the details in our FamilySearch tree. And so, FamilySearch is a collaborative program, so there's a lot of hands in the pot. And because of that, we find that, we have people with different skills levels and different understandings of the rules and different desires to be accurate and different levels of interest in collaboration, so that we sometimes end up with records that are less than satisfactory to us in the way of their quality. And so what we want to do tonight is talk about ways that you can go about making these records in tree more accurate, more identifiable by the system and by other patrons. So we're going to stress names, dates, and places. In other words, the vital information. The other information part of the person page and how to manage it. Notes and discussions, memories and sources. Those will be the topics that we'll be hitting on this particular presentation and how to clean them up. We'll also at the end take advantage of something that's new, one of the experimental features called the Profile Quality Score, which has just been released recently and absolutely fits in with what we're talking about today. So we'll explore that a little bit and see how it can be used to help us. And one of my thoughts on all of this was that, this can be a lesson to help you, but it can also be a lesson to help train you so that you can work with other people that you meet with, the other patrons that you deal with on a regular basis. And you may find that some of them don't like the idea of research, just say the word research and they run and go hide. But they might be willing and able and capable of doing some cleanup on their tree. And so in the names that they're related to. So this might be a lesson that can be helpful in preparing people to do cleanup in the tree, because that's absolutely needed. It's an essential thing. Okay, so our FamilySearch goal, of course, is to have one tree for everybody and only one of everybody in the tree. And so for the names, we need to have a certain amount of uniformity and standardization of them so that the system works properly. For dates and places, we have what we call standardization, and they need to be standardized so that they can be identifiable when you're looking for the people or when the system is looking to see if there are duplicates out there, because the system works much better with dates and places that have been standardized. For a lot of patrons, I think they look at it and say, oh, this is just a waste of time. It just means more clicks and more things we have to do, when in fact, it's trying to help the system to work better. And then there's the other data section on the person page, and also notes and discussions that all can benefit from some cleanup, partly just to make the page look better, but then also to make this whole system work better and to get rid of things that may be extraneous or duplicate and things like that. On the memories, there's things we can do with the memories that are often forgotten about when people go and enter them into tree. And then on sources, there's some things we can do with the sources to make them more efficient, more better, more identifiable, and that sort of thing. So we're going to go through each of these. And the end result, we hope, will be that the duplication of records will be reduced. Searching for people in tree will be improved. Some of the data problems that we have on individuals can be reduced or removed. And in general, the tree is going to work better. And so that's our goal tonight, is to show you how we can do that. So we'll start off with names. And as I go through each of these, I'll also, if I can find an article in the Help Center, I'll highlight it for you. Okay, well, there's two places where names are entered on the person page. And the first one is found under the vitals. And that's generally for the birth name of the person. Though, you know, sometimes you need to consider, because they ask, like, well, what name should we put there if the person has multiple names? I personally would say, yeah, the birth name would be the best here, unless this person was never really known by that birth name, or for most of their life, they were not known by that name. I have a great-grandmother, Jenny Elizabeth Beck. Well, that wasn't her name. Well, it was her name. That's what everybody knew her by. And she lived until 1913. And when she died in 1913, that's what her death certificate said, Jenny Elizabeth. My mother was named after Jenny Elizabeth. It turned out that Jenny Elizabeth was not Jenny Elizabeth. She was born Elizabeth Jane. And she was in the family Bible under Elizabeth Jane. She's on the 1850 census, Elizabeth J. She's in the 1860 census as Elizabeth Jane. In 1870, when she got married, she decided she didn't like Elizabeth and she wanted to be called Jenny. And from there on, starting on the 1870 census and her marriage record in 1870, she was Jenny. So it makes no sense to put Elizabeth Jane on this first name for her, because nobody would know who we're talking about. And so that's a case where I would recommend putting the name everybody would know her by, because we have a second place. If we need to edit this first one, by the way, we always go to the little pencils for editing. We'll be seeing a lot of that today. Well, there's a second place for names. That's under Other Information, where it says Add an Alternate Name. And so down there, we can add other versions of the person's name. We'll be talking about them on the next slide. But the key thing is, when you put names down in the alternate name area, and then you go search for this person in Tree, the system will look under both the name up above, up here, and it will also look at any alternate names down here when they're looking for this person. So they're all searchable. But I think as far as for identifying the person, you kind of need to pick, I think, the name that they're most commonly known as and put it at the top, and not just say it has to be their birth name. Okay, that's just me. The system will recommend that we put the birth name there, but there, I think, sometimes an exception to it. Okay, editing names. Okay, sometimes you have to make changes to these names. And so if we're going to do any editing, we're going to be clicking on the little pencil. And there is an article in the Help Center, and I wrote this down below there. How do I enter names in Tree? This will go through all the rules about not putting in other characters like quotation marks and ellipses and things like that, or asterisks. And it'll talk about all the various rules, the types of words that aren't acceptable in there and all that kind of thing. We're not going to have time for all that, but it is there for you. Okay. And there are other articles in the Help Center that cover like how to enter a name, name variations, nicknames, avoiding invalid words and characters, and on and on. There's quite a few articles, but you can start with that article, How Do I Enter Names in Family Tree, in the Help Center, and it will reference you to these others. So if we click on the edit, we're going to get the edit screen. And there's a couple of things on here you may not be aware of or hadn't noticed before. first thing right off the bat at the top is always the language template that's being used. And you might be surprised sometimes what will show up in that box. So you should always go back and set it to the language you're using. I use English, so I set it to English. There's a different template for Chinese and I think even Spanish and other languages. So the template can change based on the language that you set. Then the second thing, and this is one that a lot of people aren't aware of, is that for the last year and a half or so, we've had the sources that are tagged to this fact, in this case, the person's name. Every source this person has that has the name tagged is now listed on this page when you go to the edit screen. And this is beautiful because you can then look at the variations of the name on all the sources and have that help you determine what ought to go in here. And so what I did is I went down to this one at the bottom, which is, let's see, which one is it? No, it's this first one. Anna Maria Fischel, baptism record. This is her baptism record from 1773. It was found on another website, I think over at Ancestry. That's why it's got the world symbol there. But that's why I picked Anna Maria Fischel for her name, because that really was her official name. Though if you look at the things going down from there, essentially, she always went by Mary. But that's typical in Germans. A lot of them have Anna for a first name and then a middle name that they go by the middle name, just like most of the men were Johann, Jacob, or Johann Martin. They went by Jacob or Martin, not Johann. And so I said, that's just a typical thing for Germans. So you can use those sources, if they're there, to help guide you in what name ought to go here. And then, of course, you always will have a title field where you could put like doctor, major, things like that. And that's okay to put there because they are not searched like they are the first name and last name fields. And then you also have the suffix area where you could put junior or the Roman numeral 3 for the third and things like that. Do not put those into the name fields. And then try to make sure that you get the surname over in the last name area, and the surname should be the woman's maiden name, not her married name. If you don't know her maiden name, you only know the married name, just leave out the last name for the time being until you can find it. And then use the box down here, the reason box, to explain what you did. That's really important because it may be obvious to you, but other patrons may not be as savvy and would benefit from seeing written out why the name that's up there is there. And you can also see all changes. Now that's important because sometimes you're going to find if you go look at all changes and go down the list to the bottom, you may discover that when this record was created, it was a totally different person. You might be surprised how often that might happen. And then that leads you to a whole new set of problems trying to determine, what really is going on here. Because it may look perfectly like it's Anna Maria Fischel, but it might be Mary Jones that this record started as, and somewhere along the way, somebody decided to change the name. So see all changes can be a very helpful thing to see, though not necessarily always needed. Okay, the alternate name area. This is again on the home page below the vitals under other information, and it'll say add an alternate name. And when you click there, you'll get this screen. Now, unfortunately, I failed to put up a little drop down to show you the whole drop down, but where this also known as right now, that's a drop down, and it will include birth name, married name, nickname, and also known as, AKA. So you have 4 different options there for the name. And sometimes it's even appropriate to have more than one. The thing that's nice here, if you put nickname in, you don't need to put the quote marks on them. You're labeling it as a nickname. So you don't need to quote it because people will know that that's a nickname. And you can, sometimes you might have people who had a name in the old country, and when they came to America, it got anglicized some. I know they keep saying, well, that doesn't happen. Well, it does. And so it's possible that you might need a also known as for the name that they were known here, or you might need to put it down here, if you didn't put it up above, birth name, and then put their name from the old country. And then there's variations on names with different customs, like the French dit names and things like that. Married names of women. You can put her married name in here. This is where it's okay to do that. And some spelling variations too. So you have all kinds of different names that can go in here. So you choose what type of name it is, the language again for the template, enter the name properly and state your reason and click save. Now, when you're over in those alternate names, you may find a lot of duplication or some strange situations. So I just picked Henry Fischel, one of my ancestors, father of Anna Maria that we've been looking at. And he has a birth name with Fissel, F-I-S-S-E-L, also known as Henry Fischel with Fish, L, and then also known as Henry, and then Fish with F-I-S-C-H-E-L. Gotta love the Germans because this is what they do. You get every possible variation you can think of. And then another birth name of Heinrich Fischel with the German version of Henry. And so in this case, actually, they can all stay except for the very first one, because that very first one, which is labeled as a birth name, is interesting because he never is found in any record with the last name spelled the anglicized way of F-I-S-S-E-L. His name always has the H in it, and usually either S-C-H or C-H in it. And so that one we can just actually delete. And to do that, all we'd have to do is click on the little pencil, and then in the screen that opens up, there'll be a delete button. And so that's all you have to do is open that up, click delete, and remove it. Oftentimes you're going to find a bunch of things, like you may find the birth name up in the vitals and the birth name down here labeled birth name, and it's the same exact name. You don't need the birth name down here. You can remove it and kind of simplify the things that are here. Because for some people, this all other information can get very long and drawn out. Okay, dates and places is simpler and harder in some respects. They really have us, they're asking us to standardize, use their standardization system as much as possible when we're entering dates and places, because the system knows how to work with these standards. And when things are standardized, it searches much better for either the people or whatever it is we're looking for, a record maybe for a person, because the standardized forms of dates and places are easier for the computer to understand. And so that's why we want to fix them. If they're not standardized, we know there's usually a message saying you need to standardize a birth date or a death place or whatever. And that's a good cleanup chore for someone that doesn't really want to do research. Okay, so when we're in the vitals, before we start actually looking at the dates and places here, realize that many places have many different names. Europe, this is very common when countries change from back and forth. It could be in the United States. The state of Maine was populated all the way back in the 1700s, and it was not Maine at all. It was part of Massachusetts for a long time. And so you may find things that you think are Maine, but they're really Massachusetts. The key thing we want to do is to try to name things by what the name was when the event occurred. Okay, so this is my second great-grandfather. He was born in what we would say today is Newry, Oxford, Maine. It was actually the state of Massachusetts back then. Okay. And he died in the territory of Utah because Utah was not a state in 1888. And so it was just a territory at the time. So you want to get these things to really reflect what they were when they happened. And standardization should help us, but it's not a perfect system. It doesn't always work perfectly. We have to understand that. You'll be provided with a list of standardized versions of the name based on different time periods. And sometimes it works fine, and other times it leaves you scratching your head, and you just have to do the best you can. I just imagine it's impossible to know every variation of every place on every date in the world in a system. This is a system that will probably never be complete. And if you don't standardize it in one way or another, you're going to get one of those fixed symbols, red exclamation points, that'll show up, and it'll say, like in this case, missing a standardized birthplace. You're going to need to go in there to get it fixed, or that's going to stay there and haunt you forever. Okay, the key article for this is how do I enter dates and places in Family Tree? You go to Help and Learning, type that in. You'll get the articles that explain how to do this. Okay, on dates, one of the things to understand is you will be entering it day, month, year, if you have all three. I don't care how you put it in, it's going to come out day, month, year. So you might as well go with the flow. That's what FamilySearch wants. That's what it's going to get, whether you like it or not. Now, you can put partial dates in. You can put just a year, or you can put a month and a year in. It doesn't handle a day and a year. That doesn't make much sense anyway. Okay, you can put in some other alternative dates. Like you can say calculated and put a date there if you're calculating it from maybe an age on a tombstone, a tombstone or a death certificate. Or you can say before a certain date or after a certain date or about a certain date when you don't know the exact one. And you can also put in a range. You can say from and then give a range, like 1850 to 1860. You know, perfect for somebody who was on the 1850 census and you can't find them on the 1860. So you assume they probably died during that time because they're never found again. So there's a lot of variations on dates. So here's an example. I tried typing in July 1st, 1750, and the system says, okay, you typed in July 1st, 1750, but the standardization says that's 1 July 1750. And by the way, on standardizing, we go with it'll go with a 3-digit month. If you enter a 3-digit month, that's the correct 3 digits for the month. Or if you type out the whole thing, it'll go with the whole thing. So it can either be spelled out completely or abbreviated to the 3 digits that FamilySearch uses. If I put JUL in there, the standard would be JUL. Okay, so the system set the standard. All I have to do is click on it. If you have a date that is not standardized, but the date's a correct date, all you need to do is go in, erase the last digit, put it back in, and it'll offer you this standard here, and you can click on it, and everybody will be happy. And when you've done it right, it'll have standardized below there with a check mark, so that you know you got it right. Okay, the places. This is one time it really pays to watch the screen and not look at the keys when you're typing. That's why you got to learn to do touch typing, because you can save yourself a lot of keystrokes. This can be tricky. The goal is to get this name with the name that would have been when the event occurred. So I have this event on the 1st of July, 1750, and it occurred in Standish, York, today, Maine. What was it in 1750? As I start to type in Standish, York, it recognizes I've typed that. But if I look down here in the standardized area, it starts popping up things. And in this case, there's only one option, and that is Standish, York, Massachusetts Bay Colony, British colonial America. And it's a town during the period of 1750 to 1760. And then after 1760, the standard would change somewhat. And so this is perfect. I can stop right now and click on this, and that will become my place. And I don't have to type all that stuff out. All I have to do is pay attention to the screen. Okay, the system will try to provide you with these. It may provide you with a whole list of stuff. They may be in other countries or all over the world or different time periods for the place you're looking for. So you got to be a little bit careful. You might have to read down through a list. It won't always be easy like this where it's one option and it's what you need. But remember, you start there and it's going to try to provide you with what the standard should be in its best judgment. And once it's done, if you've selected it, it's going to show you that it's a standardized place and everybody is happy. Okay. So always watch for the little date things that are on these standardized options, because it's always going to give you a time period. You don't want to pick something that doesn't pertain to the time period that you're actually referencing. I don't want something from 1800 to the present for this because it's something that happened in 1750. Okay, date and place hints. You can click on see all changes, and this will give you some ideas. So I picked a person, and unfortunately I needed to use this space down here. If I went and clicked on the little pencil for birth, it opens up with this, and then this is down below that. But I ran out of room. The thing I want to point to you to is that see all changes. This gives you an option or an opportunity to see every variation of birth date and place that's ever been used on this person. And that sometimes can lead you to saying, oh, wait a second, this person's been merged maybe with somebody else and there's a duplicate merge here going on, or you'll just be able to see all the different dates and places. So I clicked on see changes for this person who has about 1694 for a birth date in Newington, Rockingham, New Hampshire, British colonial America. And I come up with all of these different changes. Now, if you watch the history over here, you can see that over the course of 2 days, 5 of these changes occurred. Ever since 2020, when this record started, this was what it had. It had a full date. And then starting on the 15th of July of last year and the 16th of July, there were 5 changes made to this record. So this gives you a chance to see a lot of different options for what has been there before. That might help you. You might want to go over and look at the sources that are there and try to see, well, what's accurate? Is there really a date? We've got a couple of different dates. One set's in 1698, the other one's in 1694. But either one of those is really an accurate date. Well, if you do your research on it and you decide that there really is something down here that should be used instead of what's showing right now, you can go over there. You don't have to go type it all in again. You just need to click on, if it's available, restore. And if you click restore, it will put that date and place up there in the person's date and place, in this case for their birth. I'm not suggesting this is correct. I'm just saying this is where you would go if you determine one of these was really accurate and needed to be shown. Actually, I think probably what's showing right now is the best thing to do, because I don't believe we have an exact date for this gentleman. But I wanted you to see this because this is something a lot of people never think of, because they don't even notice that see all changes. Okay, other information. Now this is in addition to the names. You can have events and facts, and you have a drop down that you can add, like there'll be up here, there'll be a little drop down for add an event. Down here you can see the add fact. You see the little broken line here that separates events from facts, and the drop down is quite extensive. And then, so what happens here sometimes is you'll find things here that are inaccurate. They may be duplicates. They might be totally unhelpful information, or, just totally crazy stuff that really doesn't belong there. And so you can go through and make changes. You can either edit things if it needs editing, or you can just delete the things and remove them from here. And so the main idea is to try to have accurate, correct information, get rid of the things that don't need to be there, and things you might be getting rid of are like inaccurate information, duplicate copies, minor spelling variations of a name that really don't matter, or something like a stillborn event for a child who was actually born alive and lived for a short period of time. They weren't really stillborn, but somebody marked them as stillborn. Well, then you could remove that if you know that's not accurate. So I went looking at this person's events especially, and I discovered there's two for the 1870 census. There's this one that just says 1870 Utah, and then right above it there's another census event for the 1st of June 1870, which must have been the date of the census, and it shows where the person was living at the time. That's a much more complete record for that census than the one down here, which is interesting because they were both entered by the same person. So what I would do is I'd go into the pencil, which is hidden behind the blue line here, open this up and delete it. There's also two up here for the 1860 census, same way. One has the complete date the census was taken on, the other one just has a year. So those are examples of things that you could remove just to drop the number of things down a little bit, make it a little bit cleaner, a little less messy, so people can find things easier. Okay, notes and discussions. And this is always somewhat confusing. And I found no good help article. There's a place that we need somebody in FamilySearch to give us a decent article, because you can't seem to search for notes or discussions and come up with anything good. At least I couldn't. Okay, some notes are really poorly constructed. They have typing errors, grammar issues. Sometimes they're poorly worded. Sometimes they're just of no value whatsoever. And instead of being edited, they just need to be removed. Notes can be removed. They can be removed by anybody. Here's a great note. This is brought over when they created Tree from New Dot Family Search, because it has this unknown person as the submitter. That usually tells us it was in New Dot Family Search. The whole note is the year 1788. Doesn't tell you why it's there, just gives us the year. That's nonsense, needs to be removed. Click on the little pencil, and go down and click on delete note. And it'll give you a little box where you can explain. You can just say of no value and then save it. Now here's another note, and it's not bad. The title probably needs a little fixing because it's just the first few words of the note itself. So we'll click on, and we can edit this note, clean it up. What it will do is that if you edit it, it's going to erase W.E. Dunn, who was the person that created it. I would suggest you save this to a copy and paste that into the note. You'll see what I did later. I went into this and said, well, there's some things I can do to make this a better note. So I edited it. I put Matthew Givens' name up here in the title and said War of 1812. So this is Matthew Givens serving in the War of 1812. I went through and kept most of that person's notes and then just said it was originally submitted by W.E. Dunn, blah, 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 because I know that's going to be erased. And then I added my statement to clarify it a little bit, that this is verified by the attached sources showing his obtaining land grants in Missouri from this service, from the service in the War of 1812. And so I did that editing, and then I'll go and I'll click save. And it will still show who put this in originally. And I think that's just nice to do for people. Okay, discussions are a little bit different. They do not have edit buttons. They can't be deleted, except the creator of the discussion can edit or delete them if you can ever find that person, or if it happens to be you. In most cases, you're not going to be able to find them. So about the only thing you can do is leave a note about it. So here's a typical discussion item. I am interested in this family line from back in 2010, Jody Jones. Well, we don't really need to have this now. Who knows if Jody Jones is even long? I should have checked to see if she's still a patron for FamilySearch. But if we wanted to do something about it, we really couldn't, because she put it in there. Only thing we can do is leave a comment about it, but there wouldn't be any need for a comment there. Okay, so here's one I put in. And so I'm able to edit or delete this. So if I want to make some new information, I can do that by clicking the pencil. That's the only time you're going to see a pencil on a discussion, if it happens to be a discussion you created. Okay, so I can open it up. I can make some changes to it if I want, if something new's come up, and then I can click save. Okay, memories. There's some good articles on memories. The best one that pertains to what we're talking about today is how do I request the removal of a memory or person tag from a person? That's found in the Help Center. Well, it used to be the Help Center, now Help and Learning. Okay, this is going to be kind of a touchy subject. Only the person who created a memory can actually delete the memory. A lot of people use the word delete when they're talking about memories, when they're talking about getting the attachment to a person removed. They'll say, I'm going to delete it from this person and tree. And that's not really true. You're going to remove the tag. The memory itself will still exist. It just won't be tagged to the person that you untagged it from. Okay, you can remove, anybody can remove the tags from any memory to any person and tree, but they can't physically delete the memory. Only the person who put the memory in the system can actually do that. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to contact the person who put memories in to do certain things, like to remove the memory completely from FamilySearch, or you don't have to do it for the tag. You can do that. To remove copyrighted material. You may find, like I found one recently, where my grandparents' picture was in there with another couple's name, my grandparents' wedding picture, and somebody else had attached it to one of my grandmother's sister and her husband. And so the only thing I can do is contact the person and say, hey, would you please reattach or rename this memory? I unattached it to the wrong people and attached it back to my parents or grandparents, but it still says they're somebody else in the title. So I can't do anything about it. If you can't get the contributor to respond, then your only option is to use the report abuse or the help feature. Contact FamilySearch and go that way, either through a phone call or an email. Okay, so here's a memory, and thinking of things we can do to clean up memories. One of the things is we only need one of each picture. So if somebody has multiples of the same exact picture, you can unattach them from the multiple copies. What I try to do is either find the very best looking picture, or if they all really look absolutely the same, leave the one that was put in first and detach the others and send the person a message and say, you've really got a memory here that somebody else had put in prior to you. Why don't you just delete it? Because we don't really need 5 of the same portrait of William Pillsbury Carter. Now, there's things here I can't do anything about. I did not submit this. David Thorpe submitted this. The title needs to be fixed. I can't do anything about it. They don't have a date or an event place or a description. Can't do anything about it because only the person that submitted it can make those changes. But I can do the untagging. I can do at least that much to get it out of the person's memory pile. This person has 146 memories. So having 5 of a person of that same portrait is important. Now here's another version of that portrait that's been colorized. It's a little more modern. And this is one that I put in. So I can go in, and I hadn't done it yet. I realized I need to add a title. I can do that. I can tag it if I want with different kinds of tags besides his own person tag. I put in the location, and I could also add a date, which I don't have. I can figure out a date, and I gave a little description of it. That I can do. Now, this is important. These are actually the same picture, but they're not anymore because this was run through MyHeritage and colorized. This is a picture of the original portrait. You want to keep that original one. You would never remove, in this case, the black and white one for a colorized one, because you want to keep the original. If an original is there, leave it, even though that means now, yes, there is a duplicate. This is the kind of duplicate that's okay to have. Okay, now the main place you can make, fix up memories is really yours. You can go to your memories in the gallery and set it for this icon here, which is the list. And this is nice because it will show you a list of titles of memories and then their dates that were affixed to them and places. And this would allow you then to go through all of your memories. In my case, I've got 591, and go through and add titles. And if you can figure out a date, put a date in, or an approximate date, and a place or an approximate place. And you can then do some cleanup on your memories. This only, unfortunately, works for your own. You can't do this for other people's. So if you don't have any of your own, not much you can do about it. Okay, lastly, the sources. There's an article in the Help Center called How Do I Edit a Source in Family Tree? And basically all it's going to say is you can edit the source. Doesn't really give you much help in that. So consider your sources, like the things that are in your source box or things attached to people in tree that you work with, and add or edit the titles, the dates, the descriptions, the things about it that make these sources specific. In tree, this can be done on other people's sources too, not just your source. But the other people's sources aren't in your source box, so you can't go to the source box to clean theirs up because it won't be in there. So here's a source, And it looks like it's okay, but if you think about it, it's missing a date. It doesn't have anybody's name in the title, and there's no details down here. So what we want to do is to click edit so that we can add some things. And so I clicked edit and I made some changes. You're seeing the final product. So I added a date. I could have taken the full date, because this is a Social Security death index, and it said this person died on the 26th of February, 2010. I just put the year 210 up there. I could have put the whole date. I added her name to the title. So it now says Pamela H. Thomas in the Social Security death index. That makes this source much easier to identify, because you now know who it refers to and the name that was used on this particular source. And then for the notes, which were blank, this was found, I think, at Ancestry. I can look at the link over here. It says Ancestry. So I went over to Ancestry, clicked on that link, and I copied the transcription and pasted it in here. Now people can see what it says without going to Ancestry. And if they don't have an Ancestry account, this now allows them to see what's at Ancestry, even though they don't have an account to see it, because we've added the transcription to the notes. That's what should go in those notes. And then update your source and say, well, I added a date, edited the title, and added notes. And then click Save. Okay, other things about sources. You might want to scan sources when you go to people and just see if they all pertain to the same person or the same family. Now that can be tricky, because the source might have somebody else's name on there, because it's a source about a child and this person is named as a parent. And it might say Mary Carter birth record. The parent's name's not even there. But when you open it up, you find that they're there. So you have to be a little bit careful. But you also kind of need to check it to make sure that the source belongs to the correct time period. If you're talking about a couple that were married in the late 1700s, and this is a birth record for a child in 1904, well, I doubt that's the same person. Or if you're talking about a family that lived in Maine, and this is a source from Devonshire, England, probably not the same person. So that's a way to kind of filter through the sources, looking for possible sources that really don't belong. And then for those sources brought from other websites, like I showed you on the other one, if you have the time and feel inclined to do it, you can go in and fix them up by changing the title, adding a date, putting some notes in, things like that. Okay, last thing, your profile quality score. This is this new experiment that they're working on that's found over in the labs now under quality score. And remember, you have to turn it on to use it. So you have to go on the home page of FamilySearch, down to the lab, open up the lab, find quality profile quality score, click on it, and get it started so you can see it. What it does, it has an algorithm in it that combs through that data on all the people in the tree, and they try to find through all kinds of checks things that are lacking in the record. And then they give the person a score, high, medium, or low. And it's going to be looking for things like a child born before their mother was born, name of a person not matching the name on attached sources, person missing sources tagged to their birth, all those kind of things. And they just tell us, we hope you'll find that our prototype is helpful in improving the accuracy of the tree. This whole thing is trying to help us do what we've been talking about today and pointing you in different locations saying, here's something you can do, here's something you can do. Okay, now here's all the disclaimer things. It only works if your language and your program for your settings is set to English. Your ancestor has to be born before or between 1800 and 1920. They have to be born in Canada, continental Europe, South America, United Kingdom, or United States. Eventually, they'll spread it to others, but this is their test. Remember, this is an experiment. And again, you have to have enabled this for it to work. It doesn't come automatically. You have to turn it on. So if you turn it on, you'll come to a person like Hannah Sands here, who says her score is medium. So if I click on that, I'm going to get in the right-hand column of the page a quality score explanation. And it's going to tell me a little bit about the explanation of how this got here. You're going to see the stars, and the stars that aren't filled in to indicate places where more work is needed. And so below, you're going to find, like it says, data is complete. It says data is complete 4. That means there's 4 things there on the data that isn't complete. I opened up the tag sources because it's totally blank. And it says the name has no tag source, the sex has no tag source, the birth has no tag source, on and on and on. Okay, so this gives me ideas of what's wrong. So then I can look at the person, seeing these specific issues. I can go look at the source, and I've got a birth or christening record for her. Well, that should include her name, her sex, and her birth, you would think. So I open it up and look, and sure enough, it has her name, it has her sex, and it has her birth. And if it says they're not tagged, that means nobody tagged the source. So how do we get this fixed? The easiest way. The easiest way to get these tags done is just to go over now in Vitals, click on her name or edit. When it opens up, you're going to see over here, it says sources 0, meaning there are no sources tagged to her name. I can go over here and click tag sources. And when I do that, it's going to open up all of her sources. Well, she's only got 1. Otherwise, there could be a whole string of them here. But this is that birth record of hers. So all I want to do is I say click on select source. And then when it pops up, I'm going to put a little check mark in the box in front of it and click save, and then repeat it for sex and birth. And all 3 of those will get fixed. And when we're done, this is the way the page will look like for her name. It's going to have her name here, and it's going to have, for sources 1, the source that had her name in it on a birth record. And that's how you fix the issue. And it will no longer have a problem there. Now, it is possible for these profile scores to have an error. Here's one I've found fairly common. I have no idea how it comes that way. In this person, it says the name was only has 1 of 2 expected tagged sources. So it's telling me this person has 2 sources for the name, but only 1 of them is tagged. So I go and I click on that. And after I went and looked at the person. I thought I had that show up here, but I don't. I went and looked at the person. They really only have 1 source. And that 1 source is tagged. So there's a phantom source involved here somehow. So what I can do is I click on that. Name has only 1 of 2 expected sources. And this pops up where I can go down here and I can click dismiss this, and it will turn that off. I'll need to give a reason, and I'll say there's only 1 source attached to this person's name, and it is already tagged. So there is no second source. And then click save, and it goes away and it's all corrected. So they do have a way to fix it if for some reason they say there's a problem and there really isn't, or they say, here's the problem, the person had 15 children and they actually had 15 children, poor person, poor lady. Well, you can go in and dismiss that and say, hey, this person really had 15 people, 15 children. It's a known fact, and just turn it off. Okay, so after I changed it, I said there's only one source already tagged. Click dismiss, and it went away. So we hope that going through this so rapidly that we've found some things maybe that you weren't aware of or hadn't thought about, and it's kind of opened your eyes to the different ways you can fix and clean up and smooth out the rough edges of the people and tree that you work with, and also find it a very good challenge for some people that might be into this kind of thing, that like to fix this kind of stuff, to have a chore that they can do working in their pedigree. So, questions?
Bob,
Yeah.
you have a couple of questions in the chat.
Okay, I see 8. Let me turn off our recording.